photographer doing photography. And that kind of, not getting the whole story, but that kind of pushed him to start doing photography also. So there's just this long line of documentation and photography. You can see even like some of their relatives here. This is like an old wash painting from, over probably over 150 years ago or something like that. So, they just have this rich cultural heritage, and they just have such a great job documenting it. So I knew Tim was a photographer. He's actually, so all these photos were actually made in the room. They're not digital. I think there is one that's digital, right? There's one. Did you come on digital camera?
In the end, I had to make them into black and white names so that I could print them in the dark. So, yeah, some of them originally, a lot of these are originally also in color. A couple of them. Digital. One of my son looking underneath the farm. He's like 2 years old there. He's looking for a pigeon underneath a car in Chinatown. That was digital. And you can tell it's digital because there's no detail in the box. But
I'm not sure, we'll see, but he's not going to do photography anymore, right there? He's going to focus more on the car. So, what he's been doing, I believe, almost as long as photography. So, without further ado, I'll let Tim say a few words, and then I think he's going to plug something for us. So.
This is really a lot more than I thought I would have. And when I work, I go through images and I put them together and I replace them. I make a slideshow because I have a YouTube channel. I post these works in progress to share with my audience on YouTube, which most of the people are on the other side of the world. But anyway, Amir saw one slideshow and he thought, oh, I want to put this on. So I said, sure. Well, I got to show you the gallery. When he brought me here, I saw this place, it was huge. And I thought, wow, I have to go back in the darkroom and make some of these prints larger. So that's what I did. But the interesting thing is, in hindsight, I think Emir knew better than I did what I was doing. I mean, he was really in tune with what the feeling I was trying to get in the show. And so, kudos to Emir. I mean, half this show belongs to Emir, really. Seriously, it turned out so much more than what I thought it would be. And his crew did a great job of hanging the prints. He asked for all these artifacts, and first I thought, okay, well, so people started picturing, my brother started picturing me thinking, that's the sign from my great-grandfather's herb shop in Chinatown, Oi Wong. Oi means love, Wong means calm, as in calm waters, Tong is company. So Oi Wong Tong means peaceful company. It became a central hub in Chinatown. It was where people would congregate. I did a photo shoot for the president of the 6 companies in Chinatown. I was recording all of his porcelain pieces. He told me that when he was young, he would go to our herb shop, and he and his friends would hang out there, and they felt ill at all. My grandfather would make a tea for them, and they would drink it and walk away. So that herb shop lasted until 1957. It was started in 1864 by my great-grandfather. There's a portrait of him on the scroll on the table here. He first came to this country in 1852. He saw right away that the Chinese needed health care. So he learned the herb business, went back to China. He made that trip 3 times. Back in those days, it took 3 months to travel from China. 33% of the people on board would die. They were thrown overboard. He made the trip 3 times because he was healthy. And because of him, we are here. So, the reason why I even started this stuff was because my father's oldest brother, who I call Dai Bob, he was in his 90s. My mother had written a biography of her family's life, and I wanted him to translate it because it was all in Chinese, so I could read it. My Bach thought it was a fairy tale. He reluctantly translated it as I went back there every week. And my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, was kidnapped in China when she was a little girl. She was brought over here to be raised as a prostitute. And my grandfather saw her when she was a little girl. He purchased her outright, took her home, and raised her. When she turned 15, he made her his wife. And she bore him 9 children. My mother was number 9. So that story was written out by my mother. And I often translate this. He also had gone back to China a number of times. I went there. He said he went to our village 4 times in China in order to claim that portrait of my great-grandfather, his grandfather. The communist government had said that it was a national treasure and not allowed to leave the country, but he was able to bring that back. He also found his aunt, one of his last surviving aunts, and she had a biography of my great-grandfather. So he showed that to me, and he also translated that for me. And so I would go back and see him every other weekend for months. And when you're 90, it was always a pleasure to get a visit from someone. So our visits became very special. And as he translated, I found out that there was a lot more to my family than I thought. My grandfather had, my great-grandfather had 5 wives, and my grandfather had 3 wives. So throughout this ordeal of translating, Dai Bok would venture off and, I want you to see something. He'd get up from his chair
and slowly walk over to the bookshelf and go to where his photo albums were. And he would look for something very specific, and he'd bring out this little picture, and sometimes he'd ask me, can you make this larger so I can see it better? And he would tell these stories about when he was in the military. He had very fond memories. Uncle Donald, who was born from my grandfather's second wife, and Dibach was born from my grandfather's third wife. They got along really well, especially in the military. They always looked forward to getting back together. And he showed me these pictures of them growing up. And I was fortunate in that I was able to work with all the brothers. My father started the lab, which I worked, my brother Pat and I worked for him. Dibach, actually, he was an electrical engineer, so he was in the lab designing timers, temperature control units. And Uncle Donald was the accountant. He would come in at night, and because I worked late every night, I'd see Uncle Donald. Uncle Bill was the youngest. He also wanted to come in to make his own photographs, but my father wouldn't let him. So when I started my own lab, I invited Uncle Bill. He came to work to do his own photographs in my lab. So I got a chance to meet all four brothers. And they all got along except for my father and Dibach. And they were almost like water and oil. And there was one thing though, whereas Dibach always chose pictures that gave him only fond memories. He never wanted to look at any pictures that reminded him of anything that he didn't like. It was always fond memories. But there was one memory he had that he wanted to share with me. And that was the one thing that he had empathy for my father. Because all three of them went off on their own. They went into careers that they wanted to. My father was stuck working at the family shop. He never wanted to be in the herb business, but somehow he wound up there. My grandfather, when he died, he left the herb shop, which had been in business for over 90 years, to his cousin. The cousin couldn't speak English. My father could. So that cousin handed it over to my father. And what happened was, during the latter part of the McCarthy era, a prosecutor went after herb shops because we got our herbs from Red China. It was illegal by then to trade with Red China. My father got his herbs from Canada, which originated from China. One day he went to the herb shop, opened up, and there was a padlock. And it said closed by the U.S. government. And they burned all our inventory. It was almost 100 years of inventory. Now, Dibach was the one person that my grandfather told to take a physical inventory every year, because Dibach knew what he was talking about. He told our herbs were worth $750,000. And most of those herbs were purchased before China became Red China. But the prosecutor burned everything. Eventually, the judge ruled my father to be innocent and said that the law was not followed correctly. So the prosecutor did not win that case. But overnight, our family was scattered. The one thing that, when the Exclusion Act came into being, the one exception was if you were a merchant, you could still come to this country. So a lot of people from our village came to work in the herb shop. And they all invested in the herb shop. So when we lost that business, everyone had to go out and look for jobs. My mother told me, my father had to take 3 jobs at the same time. And he had 4 kids. He just bought a house. And he had to support us. Now, back then, it was kind of hush-hush, and we weren't informed. Years later, my mother would show me the news articles, which I have up here, one of them. And in the end, my father would tell me many years later, he says, when he walked down to the herb shop and saw the padlock, he felt a great weight lifted off his shoulders because he never wanted to be there. His hobby was photography. So one of the 3 jobs he took on was that of a photographer. And that's what he wound up doing. He shared that with me and my brother Pat. We helped him build Color 2000. Eventually Pat, Terry and I built photographic software, which became Color 3 Lab. And so that tradition all came from the fact, you never know, I might be working in a herb shop today if that didn't happen. Now, when Daibak was thinking about this, he was so upset about that $750,000. He asked me to sue the government. Well, of course, being Hawes, we didn't do that. But he wanted me to take some of these photographs down to the Chinese Historical Society with that sign, which Terry thought was a good idea to donate that to the Historical Society. And because Daibak was so old, he couldn't walk the 2.5 blocks to the Chinese Historical Society. And if I'm right, he was 100 years old in 2019. In the early part of 2019, Daibak passed away. And I decided to take some of these pictures and go ahead and blow them up, bring them to the Historical Society. So that was the impetus to start this portfolio, so to speak. What happened was, in 2020, the pandemic hit, and violence against Asians became a thing that I wanted to address. So my selections and photographs began to change, and I started to include those images that showed us assimilating to the American experience, and how we were all immigrants or children of immigrants, except for the natives. And that's why I include that picture of my sister being carried by an Indian chief. So I started to include pictures of us, bike ride, camping, music, and I thought there was one thing that America took wholeheartedly from China, and that was martial arts. So I included the pictures of me and my cousins learning Tai Chi from Sifu Bill Shin. And when I got to the picture, the portrait I shot of Sifu, it hit me in a way that I didn't expect. Because I no longer did Tai Chi. I had stopped Tai Chi years ago. But I still practiced the meditation he taught us. And I thought, well, what remained from all those years of practice? And I realized that when I was young, I wanted to be happy. You know, everyone shoots to being happy. But the problem with happiness is it comes and goes. One day you're happy, the next day you're not. But what remained from the time of Sifu was a sense of balance. You don't strive for happiness, which is one of the things that Sifu taught us. It's a direct result of my studying Tai Chi with Sifu. This is what he taught us, to have a balance in our life. So from there, of course, it was inevitable that I would look at the generation that came before. And that's when I started to look at my aunts and uncles. And like the story I told you about my grandmother being kidnapped, my great-grandfather coming, it was a real gamble. There was a picture on the wall. My father shot the gambler. There was Uncle Sim and my father used to always join these photo contests, and they would meet every year at Sigden Stern. My father won first prize with the gambler. And when my father passed away, I inherited thousands of negatives, so I had the original made. So a lot of these are printed from the original made. My father told me that when he shot that, he saw that as a representation of the gamble his grandfather took coming over here, because you never knew if you would even survive the trip. So the picture that on the surface looks like a kid wanting to win something off of the shelf in a bazaar meant more than the surface. And so the pictures are like, every one of these have a story behind it. So when I decided to do pictures of the generation before, I would work on a picture of someone. A good example would be Chanyama, the seventh aunt. My mother was number 9. The seventh daughter told me. Now I'm already 30 years old, and she's telling me this. She said, "我記得你後生嗰時你壞嗰陣時，我哋打死你，which means I'm going to kill you if you're naughty, right?" Now, of course, she's not really going to kill us. That's just how she spoke. But with a twinkle in her eye, she told me how my brother, Terry, would immediately get up and stand between her and Pat and me to protect us. And Terry was probably, I don't know, 6, 7 years old. She thought it was cute. She says she'll never forget that. And that was 20, 30 years after it happened. So it's memories like that that would evoke when I worked on these images. My favorite picture of my mother is her surrounded by the blankets that she crocheted. My mother would make these blankets and spend all her hours making these blankets for us, and she'd just give it to us. I treasure those blankets now. I asked her, "Mom, I want to take a picture of you surrounded by your artwork." So she said, "Okay." So she sat on the back porch, and I put these blankets around her, and the expression on her face is very meaningful to me, because for once, someone appreciated her artwork. When I think about what my mother and her sisters, what they did for us, you could say it was a sacrifice, but it wasn't. They lived their life the way they wanted. The sacrifice that we see now was just a byproduct of how they wanted, how important we were to them. And how we grew up, how we are today, is the direct result of that. That's what remains, just like with seafood. What remains are the important things. Other things that we collect in our life, like if you ever want to be happy, you buy a new guitar, well, eventually there's another guitar you want. And that doesn't stay. You can ask Larry, right, Larry? How many guitars does Larry? It's the peace of mind that we get from the individuals who are mentoring us. We don't often think about our ancestors as mentors, but that's what they are. So this whole project was recognized by Amira when I was doing it. I didn't know it would lead me here, but that's where it led me, to appreciate the families. Remember the best things and keep it close to you so that you're enriched all the time for the rest of your life. And forget the other stuff. It's not important. So, I'm happy to see so many people here today, and especially some old friends and relatives that came from afar. I want to say one more thing before I close, and that is my daughter now teaches music in the middle school. Same middle school I went to, same middle school she went to. She's a choir teacher, so her instrument is voice. They assigned her a guitar class, so playing guitar, I said, "Oh, help me teach you guitar." So I go there twice a week and I sit through, and these kids are only in 8th grade, they're 14. And for many of them, guitar is brand new. And they want to learn these songs. So of course, I don't listen to the top 20 Spotify songs. I don't know what they want to learn. I have to go to YouTube and look it up and learn it so that I can teach them. I found out that in a matter of 3.5 minutes, along with the video of the song, there's a whole movie. You know, they hire actresses and actors. They have professional camera, really good sound. They scout out areas and they put this whole movie together in 3 minutes. It could be a simple story. A boy falls in love with a girl, they start dating, they get married, they have problems, and they break up. But it's very entertaining. And I realized that music video is made available. You don't need Hollywood anymore. All you need is a software. You can do this in your own house. And it looks really professional. And it has replaced the spread, what I call the spread. Because when I grew up, in the 60s and 70s, I used to look at Life and Look magazine, and I would see these portraits of people from all over the world. If there was a famine in Africa, or a war in Vietnam, or a fire in Chicago, a newspaper news agency would send a writer, but along with the writer, they would send a photographer. Those agencies produced the best photographers of my time. People like Robert Capa, Eugene Smith, Henry Cartier-Bresson. These are names that people don't know anymore, but they were the main photographers that inspired me. They were the photographers. And often, I only read like maybe 20% of the text, but I was moved by the photographs. And those photographs were penetrating. There's no way to fake a starving child in Africa. You look at that and inspire people like George Harrison to put on a concert to help these unfortunates. And looking back at what's happening now, authenticity becomes an issue. You can't automatically believe what you see on the internet now. You have to question what is real. Well, when I grew up, those pictures were real. And so you bypass this idea of fake news. You're not so cynical when I was growing up. So, in hindsight, what I decided to do when I closed my, and Richard thought this was funny because I turned my back on digital. Now the last 10, 15 years of my business, I didn't even get film anymore. I didn't even need my scanner. I would get files and make photographs from files. But when I closed the lab, I told Richard, I'm just gonna do analog. He called me a purist. But anyway, so my hope is when you look at this exhibit, you will be able to see something of yourself in these photographs. You look at these photographs and you automatically believe that what you're seeing is real. And you'll say, oh yeah, I had a pretty good childhood too. I used to play cowboys and Indians too when I was a kid. And that's what remains. What remains is the authenticity of the experience. You keep that close to your heart, and it'll feed you until the end of your days, and forget all the other stuff. So, thank you all for being here. That's the spiel. And again, thanks to Amir. Now, the only reason I played guitar was because Amir asked me to. He said, I want you to play one song. It got to the point where I just trusted Amir implicitly, did whatever he said. So I did bring my guitar, and
play another song.
yeah. Hands for Amir. This is like 3 years ago, 2 years ago.
Uh-huh,
I shot that.